Welcome to Psychological Explorations with Dr. Michael Axelman.
Daniela Velasquez.
And John Quasarano.
Today we're going to be exploring Winnicott's paper that showed up in his compilation after his life called Psychoanalytic Explorations. And the paper is called Fear of Breakdown. And he put this together in approximately 1963. The fear of a breakdown is related to the individual's past experience and to environmental vagaries. And I quote here from the Webster 1828 dictionary: vagary, a wandering of the thoughts, a wild freak, a whim, a whimsical purpose. And Webster adds the quote, they changed their minds, flew off, and into strange vagaries fell. So he links that there's a past experience where there is this wandering of thoughts, right, of the caretaker, of the environment. The caretaker becomes the wild freak, whimsical. Where does that leave the developing infant at that time? We're going to be exploring the primitive agonies associated with this experience of these environmental vagaries today. So the course of treatment. This is an example of a particular category type that's slow and glacial and really takes time. This is about the building of the first relationship. And I quote, at length, dependence becomes a main feature. And then the analyst's mistakes and failures become direct causes of localized phobias. And so the outbreak of the fear of a breakdown. So the breakdown shows up within the context of the transference as the patient is regressing towards this state of dependency. The course of treatment is slow and involves the development of the first relationship. The facilitating environment can be described as beginning with holding, okay, the parent caretaker holding the infant, developing into handling. And at this stage, we can see the infant able to hold on a little bit and move their way to either side and make changes during this handling phase. And there's this certain point in the first year where they're object presenting. The adult caretaker presents themselves. They believe that the infant is at the point where they can receive this information. It's me, daddy. It's me, mommy. And there's a presentation from the facilitating environment that there is a person with a name. And the individual child is going through development, which can be classified as first as integrating, where these little bits and pieces of experience in the first couple of months of life begin to integrate. And the integration happens right through the caretaking mother-infant connection, to which is added indwelling, psychosomatic collusion, this bringing together of the psycho and somatic aspects, and then object relating, where the object is able to relate to the caretaker as if they were just there for them. And this state of object relating is one-sided, where the infant just sees the adult as there for them and is unable to reach towards perspective taking. So we're going to be talking today about failures with integration and failures with indwelling, which make this shift towards object relating very difficult. Absolute dependency. At the time of absolute dependence, with the mother supplying an auxiliary ego function, it has to be remembered that the infant has not yet separated out of the not me from the me. This cannot happen apart from the establishment of a me. So we're talking about disturbances prior to the establishment of the me, of that integrated self, just fragments, just little bits and pieces that need to be held within the transference and contained and slowly integrated as part of that experience into personhood, selfhood. So we'll look at these primitive agonies, this suffering, psychic pain prior to integration, and the co-occurring defenses. This regression, a return to an unintegrated state. And here we're talking about a time sequence prior to integration, unintegration, where the defense is disintegration in the now. That's the defensive response to this regression. Falling forever is that sense of psychic pain, and the defense is self-holding. The holding is done by the self, to the self. Lack of psychosomatic collusion, failure of indwelling. The defense is depersonalization. A sense that you're not a person, you're not integrated, you're fragmented. Often you'll hear about a walking head. Somebody will come into you and they talk like there is just thoughts in the head and a total disconnection from the body. Other times you'll see this failure of indwelling where they can only come in and talk to you about their body. Somatic symptoms, pain in the body. But this body is not connected in any way, in a meaningful way, to the psyche. The part of the body gets presented and the therapist just meets that part of the body that is presented. All we can do is work with the fragment of the person that gets presented in the room and mirror that aspect. Lack of sense of real. The defense here is the exploitation of primary narcissism. Me, pushing out, trying to find out what the limits are of somebody's influence is the unconscious push at this phase. Trying to find that real aspect outside of just what's being created in the mind. And finally, this lack of capacity to relate to objects. Okay, to be able to move into object relating at all. And the defense is this autistic state. One is more dissociated and just relating to self phenomena, to internal phenomena, rather than to objects out in the world. So we see here that there's this connection between the way that the defenses come in and create its own structure, and the defenses limit developmental moves to the next phase. Psychotic symptoms as defense against breakdown. It is wrong to think of psychotic illness as a breakdown. It is a defense organization relative to primitive agony, and it is usually successful, except when the facilitating environment has been not deficient, but tantalizing. Perhaps the worst thing that can happen to a human body is that presenting of something that the child can never reach to, can never attain. That tantalizing relationship leaves the child unable to integrate and indwell. So we get to really the main point that needs to be understood, that there is a developmental factor at play, a time factor. And the understanding that the breakdown has already been experienced, lived through by the infant child, but the individual was not developed enough to integrate the experience. They lived through it, but there was no wholeness. There was no person who had developed enough to integrate the experience that was lived through. The breakdown that happened prior to the establishment of unit status, the possibility of integration is projected forward. One lives in the impending doom that the breakdown is about to happen in real time. You just feel like you are on the edge of completely falling apart. Clinical fear of breakdown is the fear of a breakdown that has already been experienced. It is the fear of the original agony which caused the defense organization, which the patient displays as an illness symptom. That intense acute anxiety where one feels like they're just about to decompensate completely, and they're on the edge of that. And that's a state that they're drawn to unconsciously to be in all the time, as a reminder of what the whole psyche soma went through, but was not able to integrate, to remember in real time. So it's relived in the transference, experienced again for the first time. Primitive agony cannot get into the past tense unless the ego can first gather it into its own present time experience and into omnipotent control now, assuming the auxiliary ego supporting function of the mother analyst. The patient must go on looking for the past detail, which is not yet experienced. If the patient is ready for some kind of acceptance of this queer kind of truth, that what is not yet experienced did nevertheless happen in the past, then the way is open for the agony to be experienced in the transference, in reactions to the analyst's failures and mistakes. In other words, gradually, the patient gathers the original failure of the facilitating environment into the area of his or her omnipotence and the experience of omnipotence which belongs to the state of dependence. It's within the transference. It's a transference fact that is happening and can be lived through, experienced again for the first time, with the analyst serving okay, as that auxiliary ego that was not available during the original primitive agony due to the vagaries of the parent. Emptiness. Only out of non-existence can existence start. Emptiness is a prerequisite for eagerness to gather in. Emptiness occurring in the treatment is a state that the patient is trying to experience, a past state that cannot be remembered except by being experienced for the first time now. When the patient can reach to emptiness itself and tolerate this state because of dependence on the auxiliary ego of the analyst, then taking in can start up as a pleasurable function. But if emptiness was not experienced as such at the beginning, then it turns up as a state that is feared, yet compulsively sought after. Only out of non-existence can existence start. I had a patient that was very generous and tolerant with me as I came to more deeply understand this importance, that the emptiness is the prerequisite. It must be acknowledged. Even when you see a lot of capacity, many therapists will defensively point to, well, you can do this or you can achieve that. None of that matters. What matters is reflecting this very aspect, the aspect of the emptiness, so that the integration of self can occur more fully and more deeply. The emptiness can then be filled only when it's acknowledged. This is the end of part 1 of our discussion. Please tune in to the second part, where we reflect more deeply on these concepts and apply them to case material and to society more generally. Thank you.